It's the question that we led with in the title, and that is, will Trump-o-nomics be bullish or bearish for gold? James, what is Trump-o-nomics, and do you think it'll be bullish or bearish for gold?
Well, the answer to the first question, Albert, is no one knows what Trumponomics is, including President Trump. In other words, he has shown himself through the campaign, through the inauguration speech, his address to a joint session of Congress, his executive orders to be, I would say, pragmatic, flexible, but also a little unpredictable. Let me give you some concrete examples. During the campaign, we heard Trump labeled China as a currency manipulator. Said on my first day in office, I'm going to, give an order branding China a currency manipulator, et cetera. And if you took that literally, if you took that at face value, you would say, well, if he thinks China's keeping its currency too cheap and he's going to do something about it, that means the dollar is going to get cheaper, which is usually a tailwind for gold. In a lot of ways, the dollar price of gold is simply the inverse of the strength of the dollar. So a weak dollar usually means a higher dollar price for gold. Not always, but there's a pretty strong correlation there. So that's kind of one way of analysis. But in fact, Trump has done nothing of the kind. He did not brand China a currency manipulator on his first day in office. It's not even his job particularly. I mean, you can say what you want, but that designation, to the extent it has any legal impact, comes from the Treasury Department. It comes in an annual report. That report actually is scheduled for later in April, so it's coming up pretty soon. But I haven't seen any indications that the Treasury is actually going to do that. Of course, President Trump and President Xi of China have this meeting in Mar-a-Lago, and it does seem to be at least getting off on a fairly cordial basis, but we'll see what happens. So the whole analysis that somehow Trump was going to, brand China currency manipulator and et cetera, has disappeared. Now, it might come back. It might not. Looks like the Trump administration has decided to pursue their economic agenda with China, not so much through the currency wars as the trade wars. They have a group, Peter Navarro, Robert Lighthizer, the U.S. trade representative, I'm not sure he's confirmed yet, but certainly he's there. He's selected. He should be confirmed if he's not already. And Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce. So they seem to be more willing to go after China on the trade front, with tariffs and countervailing duties and attacking subsidies, et cetera, maybe even providing new subsidies of our own, rather than the currency front. So I give that as an example of how the Trump economic agenda is, as I say, pragmatic and flexible. Maybe it's all the art of the deal. You put some stakes in the ground, you lay down some markers, and then you give ground in exchange for something else. So, by the way, we have been getting some help from China in a completely different arena, which is North Korea. And this is a good example of how the politics, how the global capital markets aspect, and the geopolitics and the strategic considerations have all merged. So maybe if we're going easy on China on the currency front, they've cut off coal imports from North Korea. In other words, North Korean coal exports to China have been cut off, and China at least acquiesced in what we call the de-swifting of North Korea, basically kicking them out of SWIFT, which is the international payment system. So we're back, putting sanctions on North Korea. So the point is, it's a little bit difficult to say what Trumponomics is. Number one, even from a policy point of view, and then from actually getting things done. I think the whole thing has been thrown into doubt by the failure of the health care reform based on the actions of the House Freedom Caucus, without getting in the weeds on the pros and cons of that debate. I think people can argue it any way they want, but the way I look at it as an analyst is to say, well, you've got a group of Republicans who won't support you, and none of the Democrats will help out. So basically, Trump can't get anything done if he can't round up the Republican caucus, and the Democrats are not willing to throw a lifeline, and I don't see any indication that they are. That puts the tax reform into doubt. That puts infrastructure spending into doubt. It could mean the stock market is way, way out over its skis. It was interesting to watch the stock market after the election. Of course, it was down in the early hours of the day after election, but ended up flat at the open and then rallied, and then we had one of the strongest rallies in history over the following 3 months. But the stock market went up in November on the prospect of Trump tax cuts. Then it went up again in December on the prospect of Trump tax cuts. And then when he gave the State of the Union and the speech to the joint session of Congress in January, I think it was early February, it went up again on Trump tax cuts. So I watched the stock market. It rallied 3 times on the same tax cuts. This is almost the definition of a bubble, meaning it's not as if Trump was going to cut taxes 3 times. He was only going to cut them once, if at all. But the stock market found 3 reasons to rally on the same news. So that's kind of bubble behavior. And now there's some doubt about whether anything significant will happen on the tax front. I mean, you think healthcare is difficult. The last time they did a major overhaul of the Internal Revenue Code was 1986 when Ronald Reagan was president. So that's, 40 years ago. And 30 years ago. And so it just shows the difficulty of getting these things done.